afternoon to all of you. Let us start without further ado. So it's a controversy. It's a specific controversy. We're going to talk about love. We're going to talk about the Franco-German couple, a love and hate situation. I will come up with a paradoxical stance. So it's a complex, complicated relationship, a difficult, contradictory relationship, and the Franco-German relationship is solid and pivotal in Europe because at the end of the day, if two powers, however much they are different in political and economic terms, and if they can get along, if they can make decisions together, trade-off is possible in Europe, and the European momentum is feasible. I'm not a specialist. I'm delighted to welcome Florence Parly. Good afternoon, Florence Parly. Good afternoon to you. So you are an expert in this relationship because you held a specific position, the Minister of Defense from May or June 2017 to May 2022, and next to you, Ambassador of Germany in France, Stephan STEINLEIN. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Ambassador. So love and hate situation, love and hate relationship. It's a song from Serge Gainsbourg, and it was a scandal. And then we had Willy Brandt at the helm in Germany in the past when the song was written, Pompidou and Willy Brandt. So what is the situation regarding the Franco-German relationship? Is it a love and hate situation? Love or hate? Both, I would say. In France, we tend to use the metaphor of a couple. It is not often used in Germany when we talk about France and Germany. But regarding the couple metaphor, we are an old couple. And like all couples, I mean, we are crossed, we are irked. But of course, we can't do without one another, even though we are under the impression that we know each other well. We learn from one another. And this old couple, this is something that I've experienced for 5 years as of 2017. And I started my term of office with a first international meeting, the Council of Ministers between French and German representatives. And Angela Merkel, the Chancellor, and President Macron launched large-scale projects, a future air combat system, the combat tank, and they launched a new modus operandi. A new way of working, i.e. to set some objectives. This is quite conventional, but at the end of the day, you need to consider the chemistry, how the chemistry is shaped. I was quite fortunate, by the way. My colleague, Ursula von der Leyen, she is a personality who considered that this tandem had to work. The method that has been said by the Chancellor and the President had to work, should work, so our roles had to do with overcoming the obstacles along the way. So we did lots of things together. And I will give you an example of this complementarity approach. We went to Sahel repeatedly together. And we met the different armed forces. We went to GODEAU together. And at a given point in time, we parted ways because she visited the German operators who were there. And it was in line with the mandate of the Chancellor and the President to have co-funded development projects. And I spent some time with the troops stationed there. So the cooperation went on with another personality who took over from her, And we did two things. We managed the COVID period, and she was very generous because she called me so that we can get some beds in Ulm in Germany. The military planes were transporting sufferers who could get a bed. So the Luftwaffe fetched some patients who had to be hospitalized because of COVID. The relationships between people, does it matter or not? When you consider a relationship with a state, relations are pivotal. So you have also relationships between states connected with history, and personal relations, do not harm. If you consider this relationship, trust is pivotal, but trust doesn't come overnight. It has to be built. You need to consider the different circumstances in order to nurture trust. Moreover, the Chancellor and the President were on the lookout. In Toulouse, we had a Franco-German Council of Ministers, and there were some stumbling blocks regarding the future air combat system, and the Chancellor and the President did attend the meeting in order to surmount the obstacles, to overcome them. So I think that this relationship cannot be summarized to my experience, but there are a few anecdotes, and they do bear witness to what we are. Ambassador in Germany, we don't talk about the Franco-German couple. It's a French concept. Despite that, what do you think of it? It will be very difficult to bicker on this panel. So, for example, to the question, do you like Germany? I like my wife. Countries, they don't have enemies, they have interests. So we need to be careful of a feeling of sentimentalism, especially when you consider the love and hate relationship. You've said that the Franco-German couple, this is not an expression that is being used in Germany. In France, or in Germany, we say the Franco-German engine. When I think about the relationships about our two countries, I prefer a more down-to-earth expression. French or German cooperation, more effort, more work, and dynamism. Of course, cooperation is crucial if we want Europe to work well. Without Franco-German cooperation, the European project will peter out, or might peter out. After the defeat of Nazism, after World War II, Adenauer and Mr. de Gaulle decided to open up a new chapter in our relationships. And there's a founding moment, the Aix-la-Chapelle Treaty. It was a new chapter of our bilateral relationships as part of a European momentum. It's a relevant point. Our relationships are intertwined for the future of Europe, the future of a common Europe. Of course, we have a common responsibility beyond the Franco-German cooperation. The Franco-German cooperation is at the heart of European integration. The peace project of the EU can't be achieved if there is no Franco-German cooperation. The Germans and the French are different. Our positions are not automatically aligned. But if you consider the secret of the Franco-German cooperation, means that we are French and German. Despite our differences, we can find some trade-offs or accommodations after lengthy discussions, and these trade-offs could be used as a basis for solutions in Europe. So we've managed to find some trade-offs as part of the energy market design, despite in-depth differences regarding the energy policy of our countries. So we've managed to find a trade-off regarding the Stability Pact, thanks to the commitment of the two finance ministers with Christina and Bruno Le Maire. So personal relationships are of the utmost importance. So we launched 2 projects, MGCS and SCAF, and Boris Pistorius and Sébastien Lecornu were fully committed to that project. As an ambassador, I've always met in both countries at all levels people who are committed to fostering cooperation between our 2 countries, because these people are convinced that without commitment there can't be any progress in Europe. So a trade-off on Ariane 6 in Seville, this shows how our 2 countries with different approaches can act with a mutually devised approach. Extra funds had to be mobilized for Ariane because Europe needs a big launcher, and France is ready to accept more competition in the field of space, paving the way for more innovative and mobile companies, which is the case in other countries. So we have to be pragmatic. We have to focus on strategy, and we are quite complementary. And complementarity is a key in the field of defense and energy. We underwent symbolic moments, the state visit of President Macron, the invitation of Mr. Scholz during the landing ceremonies in Normandy, or the commemoration of the Oradour-sur-Glane massacre. And of course, we look forward to the results of the elections. Of course, I'm not going to talk about the elections, and I don't want to speculate on these elections, but I can tell you that Germany will respect the vote of the French voters and will cooperate with the new government with a European mindset. We need a strong French partner, especially at the present time. The war in Ukraine, lots of uncertainties regarding the American presidency, competition with China, the need to improve growth. There are lots of reasons in order to beef up cooperation between France and Germany. And as Gustav Arvmein said, by the way, my wife is French.
Thank you, Ambassador. You spoke about the SCAF, which is the combat plane of the future. You spoke of the NGSCS, which is a tank, a combat tank. And so I'd like to turn to you, Florence Parly, because you know this relationship best. It touches our sovereignty. What touches our sovereignty the most is defense. Other projects didn't necessarily work, and there's a lot of pressure with the war in Ukraine. Can we say that this project is moving forward? Can we be happy with the cooperation between France and Germany in terms of weaponry, in terms of arms? Well, we can always look at the glasses half empty or half full. The ambassador and myself, we've always decided to look at the glass half full, at least today. We have a good reason for that, because the title of this is to bring the world together rather than separated. And the economic and political world is very uncertain today, and this leads us to try to really focus on what is working and what allows us to build, what allows us to move forward with European construction that our 2 countries feel so strongly about. We could also draw up a long list of all of the obstacles, all the problems, everything that's not moving forward, all of our misunderstandings, reciprocal misunderstandings. To not frustrate the audience, I would remind you that during the Council of Ministers between France and Germany in 2017, we launched 5 projects. We've only mentioned 2 of them. There were some other ones that, at least 2 of them that were eliminated. A new maritime patrol plane, Germany made a choice to buy American planes, and the new standard for combat helicopters, the Tiger, we drafted the first two standards together, and we're alone in drafting the third. So not everything is rosy, not everything works in the way that we would hope. But there are things that are working, as well as in the past there were. In the past, we created this magnificent transport plane that it's called the Transal, and it's finished after many years of loyal service. We have this magnificent company called Airbus, and more recently in the field of weaponry, it's getting low noise, but it's very solid and resolute. We have a co-company called 10DS for land weaponry. That is the marriage of Nexter and KNW. And since the war in Ukraine, this project that was not really being developed so much in previous years is now accelerating and is becoming a real success in its own right in the field of the defense industries. Yes, it's complicated, but things are moving forward. As the ambassador said, what is preoccupying in this current situation is that beyond the bilateral relationship between France and Germany, what can play out as of Monday is European construction itself. Because if I come back to our love story and our relationship as a couple and the notion of us being an engine, if the engine slows, if it sputters out, it's European construction in one way or another that will be affected. So to come back to the method, we're not spontaneously aligned on all topics. There are some topics where we disagree. But what is interesting is to see that when we cannot do certain things alone, and frankly, the future air weaponry of the future is so huge. There isn't a single country today that could imagine launching themselves in this type of project alone. It's really breakthrough technology. So when we know that if we do not succeed in finding an agreement, we will not do it alone, this, respectively, even if it takes time, puts us in positions where we're learning step by step to build pathways to understand each other better. The problem is the parameter of time, because when we have equipment that we know will soon be at their end of life and no longer be able to function, we cannot allow ourselves to lose or waste any time. So to talk about the Rafale fighter jet, it's known many lives, but one day it's going to have to be replaced by another. Our combat tanks also, and we have combat tanks that are older than the Germans do. So we're in a bigger hurry to have a combat tank that can take over. So we cannot forget the time factor. The time factor normally constrains us, but it can be in an unequal way, and the energy of the engine is not always completely balanced. Ambassador, there's also an opposition, a fight between the U.S. and China, and Europe has to find its growth model between these two big blocs. We know that for China, for energy, for competition, for the ecological transition, there are many differences between France and Germany. Here again, can we find a way forward that will allow Europe to reach cruising speed and be competitive? Sometimes we feel that there are two different atmospheres, two different possibilities. At the last Franco-German Council of Ministers, the governments agreed that we will work on a competitiveness agenda with the next commission in Brussels. So there are many common points. We have to move the project forward. We have to go more quickly. to work on innovative projects, and I completely agree with what Mrs. Parly said about the major armament or weaponry projects. We now need to move up to a higher speed. Around us, the world is changing very quickly, and we don't have the time to develop projects in over 20 years. Europe and our two countries are dealing with a different strategic environment. There are new threats, and we have to deal with them. And what is very important, all of this costs money. We need to mobilize additional funds, either at the national level or at the European level, in order to be able to deal with these challenges. And we're not yet aligned. We don't yet know how we can mobilize these additional funds today. Today, our coalition, a very mixed coalition, found a compromise on the question of the budget for next year. And it was very difficult. And I know that in France, each government, with its composition, is going to be obliged to find additional funds for innovation, for armament, to deal with the American and Chinese challenges. The funds have to be public-private. There's a lot of saving, but the savings don't always stay in Europe. That's the subject. That's what our respective heads are talking about, how to attract more private financing, because the public financing is limited, and increasingly so. So how can we make the European Union, which is a land of consumer saving, how can we use these savings to make our most necessary investments? There are different fields. There's energy transition, of course. There are technological fields like AI. But we haven't yet talked about the context of Ukraine, which plays on the time factor and which makes it even more urgent. The fact that we have to find agreements and move forward quickly on the question of weapons. I was glad to hear you talk about intimacy. The questions of defense concern our country's intimacy. It's our national defense. But what gives me hope is that during the Mesber meeting, the two heads of state and government agreed together to work on a topic that had never been possible in the past, despite service offers from France, and that is nuclear dissuasion. And urgent topics because of the war in Europe, so strikes in the interior. So sometimes the necessity creates law, and the context means that we need to progress even on topics that are extremely sensitive. And I can tell you that nuclear dissuasion, I've talked about it several times with German members of parliament without any success. And the situation is changing even in this field. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ambassador. We have 5 minutes for questions from the room. This is a controversy, but it's full of hope, like in couples that build together. Sir, in the third row. So please ask just a very brief question. We only have 5 minutes. I'm a citizen. A European defense industry will require a huge investment. We thought about a big loan like the one that was taken out during COVID, but France and Germany do not agree on this. What do you think? Ambassador? It's a real observation. We do not agree. And this is true often true in the Franco-German relationship. We're going to talk, and I'm sure that we'll find a solution. I think that there's a difference in our approaches. We did succeed where we thought it was going to be impossible to succeed on the financing of COVID and the plan to stimulate the European economy. Commissioner Breton launched an idea for a €100 billion investment fund at the European scale, and we know that we have problems with debt that have to be managed, and so we have to find solutions. Once again, I think we'll find them, but the question is, how long will it take? And during this time, will Ukraine hold? And during this time, will European companies know how to grow quickly enough without losing ground? Where our leaders agree and our countries agree is that it's not acceptable to observe that in 30 years we've had twice as much growth in the U.S. than in Europe. And if it has to continue this way, then our companies, our jobs would be threatened, and our technologies also. So I think in this objective, we need to talk about the means of reaching them and doing it in the most consensual way possible. A last question? The FAMAS was replaced by the HK 447 that was produced in Germany to comply with NATO calibers. So in the disagreements that exist in the Franco-German partnership, do we have the Americans in the background trying to get involved? The Germans are preferring to buy American rather than buying French or working with the French. This is my question. Is the U.S. behind this separation? So you have 1 minute. The U.S. are the biggest exporters of weapons in the world. In Europe, the U.S. is a supplier of security through NATO. It's just a fact. But we're also producers of weapons. The French, like the Germans, and if we want to develop European cooperation and ensure that we are exporting more, both of us in Europe, then we need to take some steps forward. And so we need to be able to buy German rifles when we're French, and when you're German, to buy French equipment. There are weapons that we need now, the Patriot system that Germany bought, but then nothing says that we will not be developing European systems later. So I believe that Germany agrees to discuss with the French and other European partners about developing and producing the weapons that we're going to need in the medium and long term. Thank you, both of you, Florence Parly, Stephan, STEINLEIN. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.